I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I wanted to talk about books, and I have a couple that I just read that I would like to talk about. And why do I want to do that? Because I don't have very many friends to talk about books to. So I put these glasses on so I could trick you into thinking I'm smarter than I am. Did it work? Probably not. The books that I wanted to talk about are, this is a two-part novel. One is called Daemon, that's number 1, and Freedom is number 2, and they're by Daniel Suarez, who's kind of a heavy hitter in the like tech lit genre. These are bestsellers, so yeah. So I want to talk to you first about what we shouldn't be doing, which is judging a book by its cover, but let's do that. This one, look at that. That looks like a Matrix knockoff, right? Like numbers overlaid on like some buildings, like, oh, this is not real. Not original. Number 2, this looks like a freaking digital hellscape. It's very overwrought and melodramatic, right? It has this little phrase up here, everything is under control, everything. And then he trademarked the title. How did you manage to associate the content in this book with a word so broad and so overused? I mean, from sea to shining sea in America, we are talking about freedom all the time, and yet you managed to trademark that? Slow clap, sir. I hope to someday trademark a completely ubiquitous word such as freedom. So now that we're done judging a book by its cover, let's talk about the inside, the interiors, which I liked. I liked the interior. I found the book compelling. You might say it was a novel idea. Get it? Novel? Okay. These books were really fun, okay? They were high-tech thrillers. You know, that's like the buzzword on the title, on the, you know, on the back parts when they fake praise it or whoever. And I mean that it was fun in a sort of Michael Bay kind of way, like love, love, love. So let me translate all of those sounds. That meant explosions, technology, gadgets, weapons, cars, and love. Oh yes, this is a blockbuster. This is great summer reading. So, let me get these out of my hands because I can't stop touching them and they're really distracting. So, the plot of the book, without giving away too much, is this. Daemon is not like Satan Demon, okay? It's a computer program that was laying dormant in wait of some national news, and it got its trigger and infiltrated computers worldwide, and that includes computers of multi-billion-dollar international companies, governments, you know, the Pentagon, the NSA, all of them. The guy who wrote it died, and when his obituary hit the newspapers, that's what triggered the program to take action. And its first actions were propagating a murder. How do you prosecute a murder made by a guy who's dead now? Like, oops, you can't. Okay, so thriller point number 1, that's scary. Okay, fear-mongering. Americans really like it, so I think it really resonated with me. So it starts this investigation, headed off initially by a detective, just some regular old schmuck named Peter Seebeck. It quickly escalates to involve increasingly higher order agencies like the FBI, the CIA. They even end up calling in the Marines, which is weird. And he ends up, because he sort of gets shafted when the higher agencies come down, I mean, he's just a detective of a local police department, right? So he sort of gets shafted, and one of the guys that they interviewed, named John Ross, he was initially a suspect, but he was cleared. He ends up becoming the unwilling compatriot and helper of Pete Seebeck. So you have these two fellows who are investigating it on their own. Then you have the FBI and the other higher up governmental agencies investigating this computer program and the murders. And the news sort of gets out that a computer program has killed somebody, which sort of becomes compelling for the public. But then it really hits the news when the FBI and the military try to infiltrate this dead computer programmer's home, his estate really. It's basically a high-tech, like, militarized bunker of an estate. It's got technology that the Pentagon was investigating but hadn't, like, put into motion yet, so it's sort of ahead of what they can handle. There's a Hummer that starts to massacre all the FBI agents, and the house emanates these ultra-wideband radio waves that interfere with cell phone communication, you know, regular old radio communication. So basically, the operation of infiltrating his house to access his server rooms in the hopes of shutting down this computer program is completely not within their grasp. This really interesting thing happens on the estate. One, like, rogue FBI agent who's sort of a badass, like, goes in and infiltrates the house, and he's almost to the server room, and I won't give away all the details, but he gets captured doing all this epic stuff, like, on the house's security system, and that gets uploaded, and people start watching it, and he becomes a folk hero, and his name is Roy Marriage. And his character becomes important in the second book. So that's all in the first book, and there's a lot of twists and turns that I don't want to give away, but basically what's really appealing about this book is what the computer program is trying to do, what its goals are. The computer programmer had the goals, okay? His goal was to set up an alternative system, right? So the system that we currently live in is very top-down, centralized authority, centralized distribution centers, you know, too big to fail companies, and he doesn't see that as a secure system. If one link in a centralized distribution chain falls apart, it's a completely unstable system. It's a house of cards. So he wants to set up a sort of meritocracy. What the computer program does is infiltrate these very profitable companies in all industries and blackmails them. I'm going to shut you down by emptying your bank accounts, which is all digital. I'm going to tank your stock, and I'm going to make sure all the personal wealth owned by the top CEOs and the president and the owners is also destroyed, unless you work with me, give me a cut of your resources, and let me be in the background of your company. So that's how he's able to steal a lot of the world's wealth, resources, and a lot of infrastructure comes over to the Daemon network. Now that it's got all these resources like money and raw materials and real estate, it needs human resources. So the computer program recruits humans to become users in the Daemon network. And it sets up this MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role-playing game out of life, right? There's this, they wear glass, or think of it like Google Glass, and there's a layer, like an extra dimension that you see overlaying reality, which is the dark net. So when you interact with another person who's on the dark net, you see their username, they have rating. That person's personal rating is sitting there. So if they are an asshole, you can give them a shitty rating and say they were an asshole. And it shows their class, so there's a skill tree that you can develop. So basically you're like a playable character in this computer program's MMORPG, and it's pretty epic. And the users in the network are recruited for basically one of two purposes. You're either expanding and building on the network, or you're protecting it. So some of the skill sets they develop are fighters. You need violence to enforce a new system, right? Computer programmers. You need networked hardware and software protection. Then you have like shamans. They teach people how to use the network. You have teachers. You have journalists. You have farmers, etc., etc., etc. And people are motivated to participate because those who are chosen are typically cast-offs or people who are victims of the current system. One great example was a master's student who was crippled by debt. The computer program recruited him, used his awesome skills, and then paid his debts off for him. Another one was a guy who was serving a 25 to life in a maximum security prison for drug trafficking. So it freed him, and he became sort of like a strong arm for the computer program. The computer program starts to recruit these people, and they set up these self-sustaining communities, and that's in the second book. It's dismantling the old world order and setting up what seems to me to be a perfect meritocracy, right? Those who do good and do their work get an equal reward for their work. Those with the intent to destroy the network are destroyed. And the network employs a sort of Dolores Umbridge no-nonsense type of authority. So meanwhile, the powers that be, represented by the government and basically private security contractors, are fighting against this. The best part about this series is not the story, but the story behind the story, its origin myth, okay? So it goes like this. Daniel Suarez writes this kick-ass book, Daemon. He takes it around to all the publishers, a first-time author, okay? And nobody will buy it. So, what does he do? He does not take no for an answer. He goes out there and self-publishes this thing, and he creates an underground following that becomes rather vocal and says the right things to the right people until, boom, his novel is picked up. Then he ends up selling rights to the movie. Although rumor has it that the rights have reverted back to Daniel Suarez. That's golden. You can't make that stuff up. And that's why I'm going to give this book a full glass of nearly milk. I would love for you people to check this book out from your local library, read it, and let me know what you think. And before you do that, I want to know whether or not I've convinced you to read it, or if I've made a compelling case for you to read the book. Okay, thanks for watching.